Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope everything's good wherever you are. Guys, I've just seen an interview from Demetrius Andrade, and he clowns Mr. Saul Alvarez, and he also calls out David Benavidez. I want to talk about Demetrius Andrade because he's gone a bit quiet since the Zach Parker fight. You know what's going on with Andrade, and he does mention a little bit about that as well. We're going to talk about it in this video. So firstly, he says, you know, I want to call out Plant, I want to call out David Benavidez, I want to call out all these guys, and really Demetrius Andrade needs those guys. He needs those names. He then went on to say that, like, I'm not really interested in Janibek. I'll fight him if I have to, but if, you know, that's not really one of the fights that the fans want to see. That's not a fight that the fans want to see. Do the fans want to see that, or do they want to see me fight David Benavidez or Caleb Plant? I like that. I like that talk from Demetrius Andrade. The only thing is if that's what he makes next. If he doesn't fight Janibek and he fights somebody else of a much lower caliber, and it's not David or it's not Caleb Plant, then for me that's a duck as far as I'm concerned. If he fights somebody else, not Janibek, if it's David Benavidez, if it's Caleb Plant, I have no problem with him not fighting Janibek. However, if he fights somebody else and not Janibek, and we know that that's not a top opponent, then for me he's ducking Janibek. Do you see where I'm coming from? Like, if he fights someone better than Janibek, like, or perceived better than Janibek, like a Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, then I have no problem with that, because there are big fights, and you have to say fair play, he's chasing the big fights. But if it's anyone of lesser caliber to those guys, then I think you can only say that he's avoiding the Janibek fight because it's high risk, low reward. He then went on to say, well, Canelo Alvarez, he clowned him. He goes, Canelo calls me a horrible fighter and he got beat by a basic foundation fighter. I don't know what he means by that, because Bivol is a very, very good boxer, you know. I don't know about this basic foundation. This is a guy with a very, very deep amateur background, and he's had a lot of amateur fights, and he's a proven boxer, a great boxer at that, and he's a proven fighter, and he's also got a much better resume than Demetrius Andrade as well. That being said, he said that Canelo dodged him and then went and fought Kovalev, and this is what Canelo Alvarez did, saying Demetrius Andrade that he dodged me, and went and fought Sergey Kovalev. Now, why did he fight Sergey Kovalev? You know, we've had this debate many times. Some people say he was going to be stripped. Then we've had people say, no, he wasn't going to be stripped. Canelo did this, that. And look, I haven't really read too much into it. But, you know, he did fight Sergey Kovalev, who was a champion at 175. And at the time, that was deemed by a lot of people a much tougher fight. People might now say that, well, Kovalev was washed up and he was past his best, which, you know, we kind of knew going into that. But, you know, it's just a fact that it was still Sergey Kovalev, and Kovalev's still a great fighter, and it's still a dangerous fighter, because Canelo was jumping up in so much in weight that even if it was somebody past his best, remember, it was 2 weight classes above, you know, which is always a dangerous fight. And Kovalev was a champion at that point. So it was a risk from Canelo's part, but it was a risk worth taking. Whereas Andrade, I still don't understand that if Canelo had all the belts, the fight with Andrade was massive, in the sense becoming undisputed, and he was 1 belt away. He could have easily become undisputed. Some people will say, well, Canelo avoided that fight. Well, there's a dispute, because some people say Canelo was stripped. Christian came on and said, well, Canelo allowed himself to get stripped. And that's why he was avoiding. Hence, everyone has different versions to event what happened there. To me personally, I think at the time Kovalev look, for me, Kovalev was a more dangerous fight at that point. And what I mean by that is, is it was perceived more dangerous because Kovalev was 2 weight classes above. And if Canelo was stripped, then he couldn't really become undisputed anyway. If that is the case, if he was stripped or wasn't stripped, even then, you know, some people will say he avoided the Andrade fight, dodged him and went and fought Kovalev but he became a champion in another weight class. I really want to see Canelo Alvarez fight Demetrius Andrade. I really want to see that fight. Whenever. I want to see how that fight plays out. Now, Andrade said, well, you know, I'm a horrible fighter. I throw punches from all kinds of angles. That also leaves yourself exposed for counters that Canelo can hit him with. And for me, Demetrius Andrade isn't as... He's a very skilled fighter, but I don't think he's as... What's the word I'm looking for? Bivol is quite... He's quite consistent with what he does. Andrade is very awkward, but I think he makes more mistakes. I think Bivol is very consistent and does the same thing repetitively over and over again, but makes less mistakes. For me, he's more fundamentally sound than Andrade. Andrade is probably more naturally athletically gifted, but Andrade makes more mistakes. And he's not as big as Dimitri Bivol. So is he going to be able to take the punches? The fact that he makes more mistakes for me is going to mean that Canelo's going to be able to hit him more. And if Canelo's able to hit somebody, you know, is Andrade going to be able to take the punch power? We don't know. You know, there's no way. A lot of people seem to think that Andrade is just going to dance his way and make it, and Canelo isn't going to get near him. Forget that. That's nonsense. Canelo hit Bivol as well. The only difference was Bivol was... For me, Bivol is a lot more fundamentally sound than Demetrius Andrade. He doesn't make as many mistakes. And most importantly, he's much bigger. And he's more tougher. There's no doubt about it. Look, Andrade was wobbled against Liam Williams. You know, you put Liam Williams in with Dimitri Bivol, it's a wash. It's a wash. Styles make fights, but anyway, Williams wouldn't be able to win a round or a second of a round. He wouldn't be able to give any trouble to Dimitri Bivol. He gave Andrade some trouble. And Liam Williams isn't no Canelo Alvarez. So... for me, that's a very interesting fight. Very, very interesting fight. Especially now that after the Bivol fight, where there was more holes in Canelo's games. There was hole obviously exposed in Canelo's games. Can Demetrius Andrade, somebody with the boxing ability, with the movement, with the skill, with the speed, be able to take advantage of that? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. But I would like to see it. I think that's the main thing, is that I'd like to see the fight. I'd like to see Demetrius Andrade fight Canelo Alvarez, because he's been talking for a very long time that he can do this, that, and the other with Canelo. So, and it's a good fight. It's a good fight. It is a good fight. Look, to be honest, that's very high on my hit list now. Very high on my hit list, because after seeing the Bivol fight, I want to see if Demetrius Andrade can box his way to a 12 rounds win. What do I think? Who do I think wins? Canelo, for me, wins hands down. But I am more intrigued now. I will say this, that after the Bivol fight, I give Andrade a slightly better chance. I still think Canelo will beat him. But I feel like any tough fight for Canelo now moving forward, with that kind of style, I'm interested to see. Demetrius Andrade, for me, just makes too many mistakes. He makes too many mistakes. He's awkward, don't get me wrong. And he's probably more naturally athletic. He's more athletically gifted than someone like Dimitri Bivol. Bivol is basic. He's right. Andrade's right. Bivol is basic. But he's very fundamentally sound. He doesn't make many mistakes. He's very repetitive in what he does. Whereas Andrade is awkward, but awkward also makes a lot of mistakes. Generally, athletically gifted fighters make mistakes. And someone like Canelo Alvarez can take advantage if you make mistakes against him, because he's very powerful. He punches very hard. And this notion that some Andrade fans has that Canelo won't get near him, you're very mistaken. Canelo will hit Andrade a lot. It's not a case where Andrade will just dance his way around. You know, some people seem to think that Andrade, you know, Christian said that he thinks Andrade would stop Canelo, which is absurd. You know, I don't see Andrade having the power. You know, this is a guy that couldn't stop Liam Williams. This is a guy that hasn't stopped anyone of any kind of note. And we all know that Canelo Alvarez has a very good defense. And also has got a granite chin. And someone with Demetrius Andrade, who's not really a big puncher, especially at 160, even 154, is not a big puncher. And generally, his stoppages come with accumulation. Can you really see him stopping Canelo Alvarez with accumulation? It's just not going to happen. He just hasn't got the spite or the power in his punches to really trouble Canelo like that. But I do think it's a fascinating fight. I do think Demetrius Andrade v Canelo is a fascinating fight. I also think the build-up will be spicy. I also think that Demetrius Andrade will take it to Canelo. I think there'll be fireworks. I think that will bring the best out of Canelo in terms of, I think Canelo will bite back at Demetrius Andrade. And I think it make for a really, really interesting build-up and fight. Stylistically, I think it's a great fight as well. And I hope in the future, you know, I always get an Andrade Canelo video in because I actually think that's a brilliant fight. A brilliant fight, and one that I think has to happen. It has to happen for me, the good of boxing. I think it's a great fight. I do think it's a proper fight between two very good fighters. And I hope this fight happens. I really do hope so. I think it will. I think Demetrius Andrade. The other thing is, I want to talk about Demetrius Andrade and David Benavidez. I think that's a great fight as well. You know, I give Benavidez. I give Andrade more of a chance of beating David Benavidez. You know, some people might see it the other way. They might think Demetrius Andrade has a better chance of beating Canelo Alvarez. I think he has a much better chance of beating David Benavidez. I think stylistically, I think he's wrong for Benavidez. But Benavidez's size, strength, maybe his hand speed might catch up to Demetrius Andrade later on in that fight. But I think stylistically, you know, stylistically, I think Andrade is a problem for Benavidez. I will say this: there's some Andrade fans that actually want him to fight Janibek now. They feel that there isn't really a fight out there for Demetrius Andrade, and the most logical fight is Janibek. The only problem is, I think Demetrius Andrade is looking at it and thinking, I haven't really got anything to gain to fight this guy. If I'm going to fight somebody that dangerous, I might as well fight David Benavidez, where if I win, I'll get a lot more credit for it. You see, the problem that Demetrius Andrade has got with Janibek, if he beats Janibek, I don't think he's going to get that credit. But if he beats David Benavidez, you see, he may look at the Janibek fight just as tough as the Benavidez fight. So from his perspective, from his mindset, he looks at it and thinks, I can beat David Benavidez. And it's a much bigger fight financially. It's a much bigger fight in terms of credit I'll get if I beat him. So it makes more sense for me to jump straight into a fight with David Benavidez than it is jumping in with a fight with Janibek, who is just potentially as tough for me. But I don't really get a lot from winning the fight. I don't really get much financially. I don't really get a lot credit in terms of winning the fight. So it makes a lot more sense for him to fight David Benavidez or a Caleb Plant, who's going to get a lot more credit if he can do a number on them. And financially, he's going to get paid a lot more money. And at the age of 35 or 34, wherever he is, finances come into it, money comes into it. He needs the big paydays. He needs the big fat checks because he's at the end of his career. And fighting a fight like Janibek, where it's high risk, low reward, at this point in your career, where you're 34, 35 years of age, is not a good look. If you end up losing, that could be your career done. So, of course, Demetrius Andrade has got to be very strategical in the way he moves, and he's got to make sure that the fights that he gets the big fights. But it does look like he wants the big fights, because if you get an option to fight Benavidez or Janibek, you're going to choose Benavidez because Benavidez is a bigger fight financially, and also if he beats Benavidez, he'll go into the fight with Benavidez probably an underdog. So if he beats Benavidez, right, he'll get so much more credit, and no one will say that Demetrius Andrade is fighting bums or beating bums if he beats Benavidez. The credit that he'll get for winning that fight, if he can win, is off the charts. Whereas the win over Janibek, is he going to get much credit for beating Janibek? Probably not. So I think it makes a lot more sense for him to fight Benavidez. But is that fight realistic? Is that fight at this point practical. I'm not sure. Is that fight realistic? I hope so. I hope David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade can make that fight. But I just doesn't seem realistic. You know, I think Benavidez is looking for other names like Caleb Plant, and they're probably easier to make. So again, like, is it going to be a case where, you know, Andrade might have no choice but to fight Janibek? The other thing is, what's happening with the Zach Parker fight? You know, what's happened there? Like, some people said to me, Imran, that Demetrius Andrade wants no part of Zach Parker in the UK. He didn't want to fight in the UK. That's why he pulled out. Now, obviously, we can't accuse. Apparently, he has sent his scans to the WBO, which obviously he confirmed that he was genuinely injured. But some people have accused Demetrius Andrade of saying that maybe his shoulder was messed up, which I don't see it. I think if he sent his reports, fair enough. You know, he's proved that he was injured. I don't see why he would have a problem fighting Zach Parker in the UK. I don't think he'd have an issue, to be honest with you. I think he would have beaten Zach Parker anyway. But anyway, leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think about what Demetrius Andrade had to say. Do you agree with what he said? Do you disagree? Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.